Okay, so it sounds like we have a good amount of friends and guests that are kind of rolling in. It looks like I'll just let you know, folks, that if you would like, you can join us in the chat. You can introduce yourself, and I'm just going to send them a little bit of a message right here. So they can just pop in the chat. If you're not familiar with Zoom, it looks like a little talk bubble. So you can chat with us in the little talk bubble below and say hello. I want to make sure all the attendees are in and ready. It looks like they're all accepted. That's positive. So it's 9 o'clock. We're going to make good use of your time. I'm going to get going. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Heather Dye. I'm the graduate and online recruitment coordinator here at Huntington University. And we started a Forester Forum a few months ago when it got a little bit hard to convene together, and we wanted to stay together as a community, and we wanted to stay together networking about important topics so that we could share and learn and grow together. So today we are talking in our Forester Forum about ministry, and this Forester Forum is going to focus on the relational impact that's happening due to COVID, the changes of social distancing, how that's moving and shaping the way we relate, and then also just how our ministry efforts are shifting as a result. So today on our panel, we have Huntington University alums, we have Huntington University faculty, and we also have those serving in the United Brethren in Christ Church throughout our country. As they discuss, they're going to talk about reaching church seekers, our current congregation members, and also just how we're going to move forward from this time. So during this discussion, we're going to have our audience muted. And you can chat again in that chat feature down below. Welcome, Stuart. I'm glad you're joining us from Pennsylvania. As you continue to talk, please ask questions. We'll address some of your questions at the very end and get to know you a little bit better as well. So for future use, just know we are recording. We're going to use this recording so that other people could have educational support, ideas on how they're going to work outreach within their congregation or their church. And we hope that you're going to learn a lot alongside us here today. So for those that are just joining us, once again, I'm Heather Dye, and we're going to get to know our panel a little bit more. So first, I'm going to introduce Sam Ward, who is from Emmanuel Community Church in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we're going to talk about those topics that we just highlighted for Sam, the ministry, witnessing, and how people are going to deal with those obstacles. So first, Sam, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sam Ward, and I'm glad to be here, a part of this forum. Like Heather said, I serve at Emmanuel Community Church. I've been there since 2000, which is sort of crazy in church world. I'm also a worship pastor, so that makes it doubly strange that I would be in one place for that amount of time. I graduated from Huntington in 1997, and at that point in time, things like worship leadership degrees didn't exist. This is like pre all of that. This is the BC years. And I was a double major in theater and English. While I was at Huntington, I was in lots of musicals. I was a part of the concert choir. And so I didn't really know it at the time, I don't think, but God was basically setting me up to be a worship pastor. As I look back, I can see so many things in my Huntington experience that helped set me up for that. So theater helped me be comfortable being in front of people, creating these artistic experiences, and also learning about things like lighting and sound and creating set designs and things like that that are a part of many modern, worship ministries. English helped me with texts, and the Christian focus at the university, and especially the chapel experience, was very formative for me. And I don't know if this is most important, but for me it was, I met my wife. And when it comes to ministry, actually, there's a point to this. It's not just a joke. My wife was the first one who said, have you ever considered that God might want to use your gifts in the church? And for me, that was actually a new thought. I had not considered that. It was something that was not on my radar. I was going another path. And she was the first one who really, I think through the Holy Spirit, planted that thought in my mind. And then God started to work over the next few years to eventually bring us to Emmanuel. So yeah, that's sort of who I am and how I got here.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Sam. I love that story, and I love hearing about your wife, and also, her ministry within the church as well has been a huge blessing to a lot of folks as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how you feel your role is changing in response to this pandemic, and how are you starting to change your role as the result of social distancing?
Yeah. So, what hasn't changed? It seems like almost everything has changed for us. So in worship ministry, it's, as in most ministry, it's very much relational, one-on-one, face-to-face, in small groups, doing rehearsals, preparing for services. And so that got blown out of the water. And churches are trying to scramble and figure that out. We had been doing church online for about a year when this whole thing happened. So that was less of a change for us, but we had a small group of people from the church, a lot of them on staff, who were able to come together and start doing these services. So we were able to create service content, but the real challenge for me has been how to continue doing ministry. Music ministry isn't just creating music. It's using music as a tool to reach people. That's what the arts do a lot of times in the church. And so trying to figure that piece out has been a challenge. So using Facebook groups for our ministry to try to create connections has been one thing we've done. A lot of email, texting, phone calls, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like everything's changed.
Yeah, and you talk, Sam, you are you're a worship pastor, you're singing, that's one of your gifts and outreach. How are you preparing? So we have this congregation that used to come and sit right in front of you and sing along, right? How are they able to access, or what would you suggest that those people at home are able to do in this time as we move forward to kind of fellowship with you in that way through worship and song?
Yeah, so that's what I think the challenge is. So the first hurdle for a lot of churches, and less for our church, but for a lot of churches, was create content, get your service online. And so that was really the first hurdle. But then it becomes about ministry, and that can be a little more of a challenge, at least it has been for us. And so, like you said, how do you take care of those fellowship aspects? We use Church Online. It's a platform for streaming your service, and it allows us to have live chat similar to this. So we're doing a forum, but there's always also a chat happening on the side. And so we have that on the weekend with our services that allows us to connect with people. There's also a live prayer button there in the corner. So at any point in our service, someone can click on that and have access automatically to a leader, to Manuel, to have a prayer time there. So, and like I mentioned before, a lot of stuff via Facebook and Instagram, things like that. But I think that's, you're onto something in that it's the fellowship piece that's been, I think, the most challenge for us after getting the service online.
Yeah, and I agree that there's a need to continue that conversation. That's why we're here today. How do we refine and how do we reach people in a different situation? Looking online, you're using different platforms, different apps, different things like that. How do you think, you talked about this year before any of this even occurred, how do you think knowing how to do an online service prepared you before we even got to this place today?
Oh, it was huge. And we can't take any credit like that. The Lord set up Emmanuel for whatever reason. Like it was him. We did not obviously have this in mind. And so it was something that he set us up. But there were a lot of things that we had to figure out, the technical side of it. I will say this is somewhat interesting, maybe a little technical, but for the worship leaders out there. One thing that we switched was the way that we interacted with the camera. Because before I would primarily sing with and to the people right in front of me. But when this happened and there's no one in the room, like I can continue to sing to everybody in the room, but it gets really weird. Like, for example, I can illustrate it right now, right? We're having a conversation and I'm talking to you, Heather, and yeah, I really appreciate what you just said there, right? Or, hi, Heather. Like, it just gets odd if you're not looking directly at the camera. And so the way that we interacted with the camera, we had to realize this isn't an empty room. Even though people aren't here in this time, in this space, we're connecting with them through this medium of technology. And if I have that mindset, if I have that spirit, they are more likely to enter into this worship experience. So that was one thing that changed.
That's a great, yeah, that is, it's a great advisement, great way to, you knew some things, but you knew how to refine them and roll with them. And Stuart has asked on the prayer button on the website, it looks like it's on Facebook, it's on the website as well. You can go to lots of different places. And Adam has shared a little bit about their rural folks getting to people who are older, using FaceTime, using Zoom. And I think those are conversations that we need to have. What about those different populations, Sam? How are you reaching them?
Yeah, that's always a challenge, right? And it's a lot of times it is an older population, but not always. Like, it's amazing. You can't necessarily predict it based on age. We've learned that also. Sometimes we've had some people who are older, retirees, whatever it is, who are actually very savvy when it comes to technology. And what we've learned is when you find those people, they are hugely helpful to be your ambassadors to help other people who are struggling. And so, for example, we have what we call the Oasis Ministry. It's a senior ministry at Emmanuel. And we were able to identify a couple people who were skilled in technology. And we let them loose and said, hey, would you be willing to help other people? Sure, of course. So then someone has problems. Hey, you need to call John. You need to call Larry. Right? And so then you start to make these personal connections. And over time, the strange becomes normal. And even someone who before was totally freaked out by a computer and by Zoom, suddenly click, 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 and they're on interacting with the group, and the technology becomes less of an issue. You can get to the relational ministry side of it. Someone asked as far as the prayer button. It works really, really well, and that is a part of the church online platform. It's available through lifechurch.tv. It's a free platform that they make available to all churches. You have to fill out an application form, but it's free to everyone. There's some technology behind that, but it's fairly simple, and that's how we do that. The one thing I would point out is that whether it's Facebook or Instagram, or whether you have a button or not, I think one thing that's really important is to have pastors and staff available and engaging with people online. Because especially we found, again, talking about some older people, we have people who are widows, people who are single, and they're craving interaction. And so for us to be there and to actually engage with them and say, hi, how are you? And, oh, hey, by the way, how's your job? I know that you had a rough situation with your boss. That can be in a chat, or you can do a direct message via Facebook and really start some conversations. And that's where I think a lot of that relational ministry happens.
Absolutely. So, Sam, a lot of the things that you've talked about are connections, just finding new ways to connect. Those tips are great. We'll see if we can't give that out to all the panelists and all the attendees today so that we can talk about those tools and share. And I'm going to reach over to Jay, who is with us here as a faculty member from Huntington University and also from Emmanuel Community Church. Jay, if you wouldn't just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you so we can get to know you a little better.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to be a part of this. Thanks for everybody that's online right now listening. I just really appreciate the opportunity to share whatever we might be able to share. We're all in this together. It is a crazy time, but my story really short. I started teaching at Huntington as an adjunct in 2016 while my family and I lived in the Indianapolis area. And for the last about 25 years, I've been serving in local churches in Indiana and Ohio as a full-time worship pastor. And then in 2018, I started full-time at Huntington within the Ministry and Missions Department, which is now the Christian Thought and Practice Department, and started teaching full-time for them a couple of years ago, primarily worship leadership, but I'm also teaching other ministry-related courses, teaching a kind of a Christianity 101 course as well, understanding the Christian faith. So just doing some things like that, but also part of my job is giving oversight and leadership to Joyful Noise, which is the student worship team on campus. And so I've really had the privilege of working with the students and future worship leaders, not only in the degree program, but just who really enjoy that and have that calling. And so we just moved to the Fort Wayne area last July. My family and I, Shannon, my wife, we've been married for 25 years as well. We have 3 daughters. But then the Lord opened the door for me to be able to lead part-time as a worship leader at Emmanuel with Sam. And it's just been such a privilege to be able to kind of have one foot in both worlds, the academic world, as well as still being able to lead worship in the church, which is something that I always wanted to be able to do if the Lord allowed. So it's been a great journey.
Thank you for sharing about yourself, Jay. I want to ask, we talked a little bit about those populations with Sam and the older population and maybe the rural locations, but you're working with students right here on campus. So how are you seeing this affecting their path through ministries and learning how to deal with it themselves and then also their future outreach? What are you seeing within that?
Yeah. I think there has been, I'll talk kind of just from the classroom perspective. There's certainly been a learning curve when everything went to online for all of our classes. We went to the Zoom platform like we're using right now, and we did all of the classes through Zoom. There was certainly a learning curve. Just now you're not present in a classroom face-to-face with the students. You're now face-to-face this way. So there was a learning curve that way. But in a way, I mean, students are pretty savvy when it comes to technology and FaceTime and using all of these platforms. So I think for them, it was more of the relational aspect is what I was seeing. They were really missing being able to be together and physically being together on campus and so forth. But certainly this was a great a second option, you know, if you couldn't be together physically, to be able to do it this way and finish the courses. We were able, through technology, which was fantastic, to still be able to do most of what we would have wanted to do in every class. I would say as far as ministry preparation, it's really, I think, shown those who are going into ministry to, you know, be prepared for whatever it might take to continue on. You know, some are involved in local churches, and so they've, you know, seen what their local church has had to do. But then even for chapels, we went to online chapels as soon as all of this happened, and we had every student who would want to lead worship for chapels just simply submit a video of them leading a couple of songs, and then the media department at Huntington put all of that together with the message. So we were still able to have chapels together doing that, doing it that way. Again, a good second best, but certainly not, you know, what you would want to be able to do all the time.
Absolutely. You talked about that ministry aspect for them, the students, and also yourself, challenge in resiliency. Do you think that this experience is going to give those students that are working through the ministry field right now at Huntington University a different perspective that they can use in the future?
I would say so, certainly. I think one thing that we've all learned, but I think that students would certainly take away from this, is just how important a media platform, a media presence is for, you know, the church. Before all the COVID things, you know, churches were doing that. Emmanuel, like Sam said, had just such a wonderful presence already that the Lord opened that door. But you kind of are using it in a way as, again, that second best. You know, this is something that we offer, but now I think churches are seeing that it's not just something that we offer, but it needs to be seen as an incredibly valid service. It needs to, what we do as far as worship orders and service construction and all that, needs to be thought of through the lens of what will this look like on our online presence as well. And just really resource that kind of a ministry well. And so I think students who are going into ministry realize that their need to understand that, but also to be able to, be a part of churches that are desiring to utilize that and want to kind of have that presence, not only for their church, but, for ministry literally all over the world.
You got to
And
jump in with that.
go
Sorry,
for it, Sam. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I heard, just sort of piggyback off what Jay just said. I was reading a blog by a pastor recently, and he said something, I'm still sort of wrapping my head around it, but he said, we've always thought of the church as a physical organization with a digital presence. And he said, we need to start thinking of churches as digital organizations with a physical expression. I'm still sort of working my head around that. But to get to what Jay said, I think he's trying to highlight how important digital will be in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's given a voice to something that's been there, but changing in a certain way. Jay, as you talked a little bit, that personal challenge, that challenge is kind of given way to some new light on opportunity as well. How do you think relationship, how do you share that relationship in Christ with your students to let them move through this to find new opportunity?
How do I share my relationship with Christ through this?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Well, that is woven in through, everything you do, at HU. So you simply continued honestly to do what you do only through a digital platform. But I think especially during this time with COVID and just the anxiety that all of that can bring to students, but to all of us especially, it's just reassuring to know that God is not on the throne going, oops, I didn't see that coming, dropped the ball, on that one, what was I thinking? But he is totally in control, and that this does not surprise him. And so how are we going to then be the hands and feet of Jesus with what we have been given in this day and age to use? How can we continue to shine for Christ and not bury ourselves in our corner, woe is me, the sky is falling and all of that, but hey, God's on the throne. I know whose I am, and Lord, use me. Lord, use me for whatever purpose you have right now for such a time as this. With the platforms you've given to us through technology, whatever it might be. But just that reassurance that, man, I am his, he is mine. And at the end of the day, that's all I need to know. Now that's a good head thing. And sometimes it's hard to get to the heart, but that is true. That's the promise that we have in Christ, that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and will never change.
Thank you, Jay. As you, I'm going to ask one more question, and then Nick, we're going to head over and have a talk with you as well. As you develop plans to bring people back, so moving into that different fold of, utilizing online, but then going back to fellowship, what are you considering when the time is right to bring people back as you worship together again?
Yeah. Are you talking at Huntington or at Emmanuel or both? Or?
Yes, both. As we come together in maybe at Huntington, but come together as a body again at Emmanuel as well.
Yeah. Well, so much of that decision rides on, what our government is doing, what our government says is prudent and all of that. But then I think, too, you've got to look at each individual case. And, we were just talking about this, weren't we, Sam, just yesterday, talking about what I think everyone is so anxious to get back together, and for good reason. We want to get back together and worship, but what that looks like will just not be the same, at least starting out, right? It's just not going to be. There's still going to have to be precautions. What does children's ministry look like? And there's just a gamut of questions, to ask when getting back together. And so I think all of those things have to be factored into the decision as far as when do we get back together. And so Emmanuel, for instance, has such a wonderful online presence, factoring that presence that they already have that is working so well into the decision of when do we get back together. Because I think one of the things you don't necessarily want to do is get back together and it just isn't like at all what you thought it was going to be. And so that would kind of be the church world, but then, you know, the university world, there's so many other decisions that I certainly wouldn't be a part of that process, but just the safety of students, the health, and, you know, the well-being of campus life and dorm life, and, you know, large groups getting together and so forth. There's just a lot of decisions that have to be made, even if the government would give the green light. You know, what is prudent for our situation, for our time? What can we do with technology that would allow us to continue doing what we need to do, but then work our way into a new normal, if that's the word that we want to use.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to phrase it, working into something new. I think that's great, Jay. I'm going to move a little bit over to Nick. And Nick, if you could again share about yourself, tell us about your experience with Huntington and what you're doing now as well.
Yeah, so my name is Nick Balsiger. I'm the student and discipleship pastor at the Well in Huntington. So I graduated from Huntington University in 2018. And throughout my 4 years there, I attended the Well and was the volunteer youth director or coordinator. And then I got hired full-time once I graduated. So it's been really, it was, when I was looking for jobs, it was fantastic to just be welcomed into the church that I called home for the last 4 years. And I have loved, so I just completed my second year, or I'm now entering year 3. So it's been awesome to just be a part of my church family, and I can't imagine going to some other church anymore, just because it is such, it is my family. It is truly really my first family at this point. So.
Excellent. So it is good to hear that you love your home, and also that you've engaged by moving through Huntington University as well. What is your role? What does your role look like there at the Well?
So I do student ministry, and I'm on the teaching team, as well as organizing small groups and maybe some other classes for our adults. But the majority of my efforts and time go to our students and for our 6th to 12th graders, and as well. And then a little bit goes to small groups and just organizing that and allowing small group leaders to have what they need to run their small groups. And then I preach just once a month. So, and then I used to do children's, but we have a children's pastor now. So.
Yeah. So you've grown in different facets. It sounds like you're doing a lot of different things, Nick, and a lot of different roles. Can you tell me about those experiences that you're having with the social distancing, working with small groups and things like that? What have you done to kind of continue that outreach with those groups?
Yeah, so for small group purposes for our adults, it's kind of just, it's up to them as a leader and a group to kind of decide if they want to go on Zoom or if they want to keep going in face-to-face or hold off for a while, whatever. It was really up to them, just because it only affected their group. So they were able to do that for that. So just really, I'm just a resource for them and allowing them to do whatever. Student-wise, a lot has changed. So during the height of it, we were on Zoom. Our normal program ran on Zoom, and our normal program, we would do games when we were in person. We would do games, do like announcements, and like we do Bible trivia for our students so they can learn some Bible literacy and stuff like that. Do a message in small groups, and on Zoom format, and that took about an hour and a half. On a Zoom format, games, you only can play screen games for so long before it's really old and boring, and as well as like the messages, like sharing a 15-minute message or so to students on a screen is just it's not really great. So we switched our format to, we didn't do any really games. All of our small group leaders had the option, so we would all get on Zoom. I would share just a quick little 2-minute, like, this is what we're talking about, and then any announcements that I had to share, and then they would go in their small groups the entire time. And then we had we use Orange curriculum. So we have the videos of the lesson. I separate them into like 2 to 5 minute sections. They would watch that portion of it, and then they had questions for discussion in their small group. And but my numbers on Zoom were very lower compared to what we are in person, and just connecting with students, it was and still is very difficult. I used to be able to go to lunches, go to the sporting events, or even Walmart, of just seeing students there and being able to connect with them. And then now only being able to connect with them on Instagram or texting, and especially if I don't even have their number or contact with them, it's very difficult to stay connected with them. And just, I know for our students, being on Zoom, it's really uncomfortable for them. If you think about it, and when you're talking to people in normal interaction, you don't ever watch yourself talk. On Zoom, you're constantly seeing yourself talk, and you're always self-conscious of how you look. And even more so for our middle school students and even high school students, like they're always seeing themselves talk. And even as you're probably talking on Zoom, like I always am watching myself, and I don't do that normally as I talk. So it's just, it's exhausting for people to be on Zoom all the time, and even more so for our students. So it was challenging, and I hope that we don't have to do Zoom again, but it was an okay second.
Yeah. And if you continue to do that, I know you're sharing a little bit. You talked about rooms. Some people might not know what that means. What are rooms in Zoom about?
Yeah, so everyone can come on, and then they're breakout rooms. So then the host of the Zoom meeting can put in each student, or the leaders as well. So the leaders were able to start a room, and then they were with like all the middle school guys were in one room, and they only talked to each other. So all the girls and the high school guys were in different rooms, and that just allowed for it to be just not chaos. Middle school students, they don't know how to mute things, so there was always like a dog barking and someone yelling at their mom, like that they're on Zoom. So instead of having it interrupt everyone, it was only interrupting their one group, and the leader can mute them. So yeah, but the breakout rooms were really useful to facilitate small groups in some way.
Okay. Yeah, it gave a little bit of breakout to some of that. Like you said, it's the second best to meeting in person and things like that. I know that, Nick, I've heard a little bit about utilizing the strengths of different people, different staff members in outreach. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you're using different leadership to do that together?
As a church-wide or just students?
Yeah, as a church-wide, how are you using that staff to engage with others? You're kind of dividing, of course, all those tasks to help that outreach.
Yeah, so Andrew Edmonds is our tech guy, and we were already set up for an online service before this, and so the online service hasn't changed all that much. Our content changed a little bit, but our online services and how we do stuff is still the same, because of all the amazing work Andrew does. That's way over my head. So, and then as well as, one of our staff worker is a nurse. So like going to her and asking her like, all right, what do we need to do health wise? Like you're in the health field, you know what's going on more than us. So like, we want to listen to what you're saying, as well as our elder team, just knowing, just a whole spectrum of knowledge and perspectives of just learning where everything is going, and as well as our government. So we have opened up smallly. So we're a church of around 250, and so once the government, Indiana, opened up to groups of 25, and now we're up to 100. We've been following those guidelines and social distancing. So like we only have 4 rows in our entire sanctuary. So they're very spread out, and it's weird. And then our online service is still continuing. So it just gives the option for 75-ish people to enter an RSVP to come, but as well, everyone will still be able to, and still is able to watch online for our services.
Okay, so you said you're RSVPing for folks, so you know about how many, and then you're able to kind of control that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And through this, Nick, what have you learned about the support of people and those maybe seeking the church for the first time? And again, those who have been continual members or attendees, what have you learned about the future support that those folks are going to need?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a individual thing. It's not something that we can just look at the group and say, here, take it. Each person really, especially for those who don't have access to internet, like they can't have an online service very well, or those who just don't understand Zoom. My wife had a conversation with someone for an hour who had a computer that was like 20 to 15 years old, and the Zoom was not going to work for her. So we've been making DVDs of our services for those who don't have access to online or Zooms, so that there's still something, as well as just making phone calls to those who just have flip phones, but we still can talk to them. And if that was just on me and Josh alone, like that would be a lot, but we have a lot of awesome people in our church who are just still connecting with people, whether it be through Zoom or phone call or even letters, just stuff like that. But people need to stay connected. When we were created to be in community, even when in the Garden of Eden, when Adam had a perfect relationship with God, it was not good for him to be with only himself and God. He needed community with other people. And as a church, we need community, and online is a good second, but there needs to be some other things that are happening as well with community. And it can't be only found on the full-time staff. It's got to be a whole church-wide working together as a family to make sure that we're all staying connected and being supportive of each other, and being in community as the body of Christ.
You bring up a good point, that it's beyond just that the faculty or elders or those who are sitting and serving the church in that capacity. How are you thinking that folks that are attendees or members or those folks, how are they going to engage or help out?
Yeah, so I mean, we have people that we already were using in leadership roles that are not on our staff, but they just are lay leaders who are they love the well and love the church and are ready to jump in whatever capacity is needed. So we just reached out to those, and if they knew people that were wanting to do it as well, just reaching to them as well. A lot of the ministries already had specific leaders that were going on. So like for youth, I already had my leaders. So what that looked like and what I asked of them looked a little different, but they were still able to, me trying to connect with 50 students on text messages would be the worst. So having my leaders send out messages and, doing FaceTimes and stuff like that.
Excellent. All right, Nick, thank you so much for sharing. We'll come back and ask a few more questions, but I'm going to move over to Annette. Annette, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your connections through ministry, and also Huntington University?
Sure. Welcome to everybody. I've enjoyed hearing you guys' stories much more. I live in Virginia. My husband's been a pastor of Jerusalem Chapel since 1984. Aging myself. As far as my connection to Huntington, I think Hardy Hall is undergoing a renovation right now, and I was at Huntington College when Hardy was the new dorm. So I got my associate degree from Huntington years ago, and I'm working on my master's online now. So I'm a pastor's wife. I work part-time in the church office, mother of 3 grown children, 7 grandchildren. So daughter went to Huntington, met my husband at Huntington, one of those percentages. So always been very interested in what Huntington's been doing, and it dramatically, I rededicated my life to the Lord while I was at Huntington. So tremendous impact on my life, and now and years ago.
Excellent. We talked a little bit, Annette, before. You talked about some personal experiences, the outreach that you've experienced, both in the church that you're in the fellowship that you've had. How are you connecting in this time of changing the social distancing right now? How are you connecting with those folks?
A lot of my ministry was on Sunday morning. So as far as teaching and women's ministry events, those type of things, that pretty much kind of went to the side, but as far as my normal connecting with people and making phone calls and checking in, I just tried to continue that and find different ways to do that. My office role, while there wasn't as much going on in the office, I had to switch into being the tech team for my husband. And so my Huntington College experience, recording myself and uploading those videos to YouTube, I had no clue when I was going through that uncomfortable thing for myself that God was going to use that to help my husband record himself on a computer and get used to, what that would be like. And I can't remember, I think it was Sam that mentioned, just getting used to talking to the screen is a strange event. And when I first did my long speech for one of my Huntington classes, I kept staring at the screen like a deer in headlights. So I tore apart one of the church directories and I posted pictures of the church congregation on the walls around where my little flip cam was, so I could somewhat act normal talking to people. It was still, I need a lot of improvement, but it was a start. So when my husband was trying to try this whole new technology thing, I at least could be very sympathetic with him and encourage him on. And it's mind-boggling to think that God used that to help him to be able to present the gospel effectively and just be a part of that process. So a lot of learning curve there. As far as connecting with people, our slogan kind of from the beginning, if you want to call it a slogan, was we weren't going to be able to put a lot of Zoom things together. A lot of our people can't get internet. We live in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia and mountainous areas. And even if you're just in a little dip, my daughter, school teacher, she can't get internet. She's 5 minutes away from the school, hot internet, but at her house, no. So we knew we couldn't do that effectively. So we really encouraged them to do that. Responsibility. What can you do? What has God called you to do? And so we've seen a lot of people do some very unique and creative things that way. And the church itself has done some fun, creative things.
Okay, that sounds good. And you've touched on something. I think Nick's talked about the size of the well being different, and then your home church being in just a geographical region that makes it difficult to use some of the tools that other people are accessing. You and I also talked about a very creative way that you're reaching the church through drive-in church. Can you talk a little bit about drive-in church there at your location?
Yes, we started Virginia State. They opened a 50% capacity 2 weeks ago, and we had earlier ordered an FM shortwave transmitter. I don't know the technical term for that. Well, it took weeks to come, so that couldn't happen, but it ended up coinciding with the week the sanctuary could open at 50% capacity. So we were able to open the sanctuary to some, and then the FM, the service would be not recorded, live on FM. So for those that wanted to be in the car, could be out in the parking lot, they had to be nearby. But within that, so that was a wonderful resource. But my husband was very creative with that, trying to keep the people in the parking lot feeling connected. So the first Sunday, just during greeting time, he just had the people in the sanctuary shout out, hello, howdy, or whatever. And then he asked those in the parking lot to honk their horns. And because we had the windows and doors open, so people wouldn't be touching the doors, they could hear that. And, he just thought, oh, it's just creative. We'll try this. People loved it, loved it. So now they want to honk their horns every Sunday if they're here. You just don't know what's going to help people feel connected. It was Memorial Day weekend, obviously this weekend. So usually we do a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. So he had several individuals take flags out on the parking lot. So when the ones in the sanctuary were doing the pledge, they were actually seeing someone and they got out of their cars and pledged at the same time. He also purchased an air horn. He's planning on using that somehow. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like, but somehow he's going to incorporate that just so those in the parking lot don't feel, yes, we're here, but can't really get involved. We also had someone that would deliver the sermon outline and the song sheet to them so they could participate that way as well. So
awesome. And someone else is saying that they would like to get information of the make and the model of the FM transmitter. They've been looking for that. So we'll follow up with attendees. Just to remind you, this is recorded. We're going to send you a link. If you'd like a link, share your email in the chat so that we can get to you. We probably already have some information from you in our webinar registration. So we'll send that along the way. And then I'll talk to you about the FM transmitter that you've been using. In addition, when we chatted, you talked about something that you called just being the church. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. Some of the ways that have been fun. One lady is really into chalk art. I don't know if those that are listening have heard that, but it's a design thing. Anyway, she had a lot of extra boards and chalk and time at home. So she put together a lot of scripture-based little signs, and she delivered them to people that were undergoing cancer treatment or the elderly or whatever. So it was just, hey, what resources do I have that I can take this time and energy and visit people, and just did a little drop off. And she's gotten tremendous amount of, thank you for thinking of me. We had a gentleman in the church that was dying of cancer, and there were men that were staying with him when his wife had an obligation on Tuesday nights. And so they continued to do that, even with the social distancing. They're kind of like, they still need taken care of. So they were taking a risk. They made a choice together. Anyways, he just passed away. They all sat together in church on Sunday morning, and we had encouraged people to sit together as family groups, because you can only use 50% of the church and then 6 feet distancing. And so that group sat together, and there was someone concerned, like, now they're not doing social distancing. And my husband had to say, well, actually, they've been a family to each other. They have been together now every day for the last whatever, and especially through the funeral kind of stuff. And so just, we have to be careful not to be judgmental when we do come back together, and think everybody's circumstances is different. I don't know what those family units look like. I don't know why that person's closer than someone else, and be respectful of that. And then the other one for me personally, my social distancing actually got more social. So my daughter works at a hospital. And so for me, yes, I wanted to help take care of her children because I'm her mom and the grandma. But for me, that was me being the church. I mean, it was every day up at 5:30 and out and gone. And, I love my grandchildren, but that's a lot for a lot of weeks, and helping with the teaching. And so, there were times and moments, and I'm like, no, this isn't just for my daughter and grandkids. This is being the church. So there's so many people out there that are just doing normal things to love the Lord and show their love for others. And maybe they're not acknowledging the fact that God is using them. God is using them to share the gospel. Who else better to invest in than our children, family members, those that maybe we feel stuck with.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to reach back to our panel as we've talked to everyone, gotten to know you a little bit more. As you've listened and if you heard a little bit more, Sam, can I come back to you and talk about that a little bit, what Annette had shared, that being the church, being there for others. Can you tell me about Emmanuel and just that effort there? What is being the church, Sam, for you there?
Yeah, I've had a couple thoughts as people were talking. First of all, I think I've talked a little bit about the challenges of online, but one of the positives we've seen is that sometimes people are more honest online than they are in person. And a lot of times we see the negative side of that, like someone's just spouting off on Facebook and you're like, seriously, that's not the right place for that. But it is interesting, if you're willing to step into that space, sometimes people will be more honest with you online than they would in person. And if you can embrace that and see that as an opportunity, that can be an open door for ministry to engage with someone that hopefully then will continue in, physical space. As far as Emmanuel caring for people, early on, there was a call for the need for masks. And so we have a sewing ministry at our church, and some of the women in our church just decided we're going to do this. And so they started sewing masks and delivering them to different medical professionals all over the city. And so that became a testimony for our church The local news organization, TV station heard about that, came and did an article on it, interviewed some people, some of the ladies. And so, on Fort Wayne TV, we've got a woman saying, we're making masks not just because we care about them because they're Americans, but because this is what Jesus would want us to do. And so it was just an amazing testimony to our city that we got to be a part of. Like everybody else has sort of talked, I think the biggest thing has been keeping the focus of the church on the mission of the church and then on the people of the church instead of just technology and stuff like that. That can be a distraction. And so, like Annette was just saying, a lot of times I think it's one-on-one interactions, and Emmanuel's no different than Jerusalem Chapel. Like, it comes down to the people, and are we ministering to the people that God's allowed us to be in community with?
Thank you, Sam. In that, Jay, can I come back to
I have
you?
one more thought.
Oh yes, go ahead, Sam.
One more quick thought. For us, another thing that Annette said, we've realized that the ministry of people who are grieving has been doubly important. One of the effects of grief is that it makes you feel isolated. And so if you're grieving in isolation, you have a double grief that you're trying to process. And so we've realized that that's a huge ministry of trying to reach into those spaces in ways that we can as much as possible. And to see that as obviously a needed ministry, but even more so in times of isolation.
That's very important. That's very important, Sam. Thank you for sharing that as well. Jay, I just wanted to ask you also on the, talk back as you've heard, are there items that you want to share as you've talked, that are great tips or a little bit more about being the church together?
Yeah, I would say, as I think of, going to the digital platforms and all of that, it's been interesting to me that actually the students during this time had more access to me. So if, they needed to, talk about an assignment or even just something personally that they were going through, it was really easy to just set up a Zoom call with them and just talk through whatever it might be, where if it was the normal. So Sam talked about the positive things. I mean, that's really been a positive for me that we all have more time on our hands now. And so, instead of having to get off to another class or, office hours being weird, it's been really great to just be able to set up a quick Zoom call with a student and just talk about life or whatever they may be going through. I think too, on the ministry side, just of worship leadership, one thing that I've kind of noticed is, as worship leaders, we lead worship most effectively when we realize that we first and foremost need to worship the Lord ourselves. So if we're just trying to lead people instead of first worshiping the Lord and then allowing that to lead the people, then if we're not doing it that way, we're missing, I think, what the Lord would have for us, that we get to first minister to the Lord. And I think in a weird way, staring into a TV camera or whatever it might be, this weird way now of doing church has allowed us in a way to remember, okay, you know what? This is really weird. We are still wanting to minister to our people, but we get to minister to the Lord first. This song that I'm singing or whatever part of the service we're doing, this is first an offering to Him. And if that is pleasing to Him, if that has been given, in a way that would put a smile on the Lord's face, I think in a way by default, it's going to bring people into that moment, even if they're, tuning in from Florida, or wherever they might be, that I think the Spirit can just use those moments in a powerful way that honor Christ. And so I think in a way it's been a good focus for us as well. So
I agree. One of the things that I've loved is that I've been able to see church services from all locations. I've been able to experience and worship in ways that I didn't know were available. I've been able to hear sermons and just learn in so many different capacities. So in a way that positive has given us more opportunity, at least online, to get to know one another. Jay, do you think that's something, you talked about this is something that needs to be more of a staple than just the option B, being equal as a platform. You think that will happen in the future?
I think so. I think everyone's realizing, wow, I can tune into services anytime, anywhere, and there might be pastors that I've not had an opportunity to hear. Well, now we do, and so I think it's a great understanding too that the body of Christ is so much bigger than just our local context too. I think that's something we're understanding and appreciating, that yes, we want to minister to our local body and reach out to them, but wow, the body of Christ, look at how God is using the body. And it's so cool to tune into other services and see how God is using that church in their community to, like Sam said, make masks or whatever it might be that they are doing to really be the hands and feet of Jesus in that community. I know for me personally, I've seen, I'll mention, somebody tuning into Florida. I have, family members who I would say would not be going to church on a regular basis. Before all this COVID, it was kind of a hit and miss. Well, now they are tuning into Emmanuel services, Fort Wayne, Indiana, living in Jacksonville, Florida, and now they are calling Emmanuel their church home. They tune in regularly. And so it's really been cool for me to see on that personal level, to see family members who, wouldn't be going to church on a regular basis now doing it more regularly just from their homes, and finding that to be such a benefit to them spiritually, and hopefully they'll even take the step of accepting Christ. So it's been cool.
What's interesting is the Barna has just recently released some research, and according to their stats, they say 40% of churchgoers report watching their regular church, which is actually a little small. It seems a little low if you think about it. But also 23% of people report that they're watching another church instead of or in addition to their own church. So it's not just us, like across America, people are doing that. I think what you said, Jay, it also highlights the next step, which is, so for people who are joining us, like your family from Jacksonville, Florida, like what's the next step? That's what we're asking Emmanuel right now. So we have a service, but then spiritual care, and then also spiritual discipleship. Like how do we take people through a discipleship process of having them dig deeper, join community, if there's only a digital connection, which we've seen some of that. And that's a brand new world for us. We're still trying to figure it out. We'll see.
Yeah, great opportunity, right? Yeah, a good problem to have when you have to find a way to serve others, right? Nick, we have just a few minutes. I'm going to ask you too, as you've listened to our panel, as you heard a little bit, is there something else you want to share about your church and your experience?
Yeah, I think we also have been having people that have been coming to the well online all around. And I think it's a interesting opportunity for us to use of, a lot of the reasons why people don't go to church for the first time, or they left and then haven't come back for a while. And the reason is because they don't feel connected, or they're like, it's too daunting of a task to go somewhere and meet all these different people. I think there's a great opportunity for this online service, since they're not doing anything on Sunday morning, because we weren't either, as far as everyone had a lot of free time. The majority of people were just desiring to have something happen. And what a great opportunity for our online service to be kind of that first step of them getting to know what we are. Like, I just know in Huntington, the majority of our churches in Huntington that are larger in our city have live streams. So if people in Huntington don't go to church, they can kind of check out each one, and they'll know a little bit about people on stage. So they'll see the worship team, they'll see the pastors, as well as people that just do announcements or our prayer times. So they'll know a couple of people, so that when we do open our doors fully, and that they would feel comfortable coming, they know a couple of faces, they know the routine of the service, they know what the stage looks like. It's not going to be a completely new thing. Still will be a little bit of a daunting thing, but it's one way that they can kind of start that connection with us or other churches online before that they are fully delved in. How to connect with them, we're still figuring that part out.
Yeah, that's great. Nick and Sam and Jay and Annette, you've been a wealth of information, great resource, and we hope that we can continue this conversation. There's so much we have yet to talk about. It sounds like we've learned a lot through this process, but we're going to continue the conversation in the future. Again, to our attendees, we're going to be sending out a YouTube video that you can share. Continue that conversation with one another as we want to find ways to fellowship, and also as Nick and Sam, Annette, and Jay, you've all talked about, we're finding new opportunity here through a situation that is hard. It's hard to be in, but the opportunity to connect and be the body of Christ is still there. So thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to talking with you online and in person in the future. Thanks, everybody.